I've watched a lot of TV shows, and I've written a lot of stories so far, most of which will never see the light of day, thank God. And I've come to appreciate several writing conventions that many people may overlook because of how much they can improve a story. And one thing I've come to appreciate a lot is how large casts can improve storytelling. Having a lot of characters can often lead to bloating of the story and superfluous characters that take away time from the plot, or on the flip side, be really interesting to the audience despite their lack of overall relevance. But if a cast is handled properly, it can create an avenue to explore the themes of the story from various angles and details. And when I think of using the cast of a story in such a way, one of the first examples that pops into my head is Ever After High. In this video, I want to break down exactly what I find so impressive about Ever After High's portrayal of its characters and how they are used to explore the overarching subject of destiny. Yes, I am aware this show only has so many characters so it can sell toys, you don't need to remind me. For those who are unaware, the story of Ever After High takes place in a high school where the children of classic fairy tale characters prepare to reenact their parents' stories. Though I'm guessing the way the story is structured, their parents would also have had to reenact their own parents' stories, the descendants of classic fairy tale characters. Is it weird that Applewhite is so chummy with her apparent future evil stepmother Raven? We don't talk about that, but a House of the Dragon style reimagining of the show would be hilarious. It would probably suck, but I'd laugh anyway. Then again, a series where the characters acknowledge the darker aspects of their history would make an interesting dark comedy. How does Ramona Badwell feel about going to school with the guy who's going to cut her open and pull out Cerise? Speaking of Raven, she upends the school's order when she takes a look at the future her story holds for her and goes, "I'd rather not." The school is divided into two factions, Royals and Rebels. As you can imagine, the Royals are the kids who want to follow their destinies, primarily made up of royalty, because of course it is, they are the ones who get the happy endings. And the Rebels are the kids who side with Raven. It's a bit like Disney's Descendants, but better. Raven Queen, daughter of the evil queen, is less than happy with her lot in life, feared by everyone and fated to enact suffering on the world and wind up eternally imprisoned for it. So when the day comes to pledge to do just that, she refuses. By contrast, Applewhite is her opposite. She's the daughter of Snow White, and can I just say that her name is the equivalent of naming your son Bullet because you met his father in a hospital after you were shot. Apple is actually more interesting than you'd expect. Her personality is kind of what you'd expect from someone who knows their future, specifically the happiness that will come at the end of it. So she gleefully talks of all that suffering, excited for the future that comes after. Apple doesn't even really dislike Raven, seeing her more as the person who starts her on her journey to her happily ever after than her enemy, and encourages her to be bad. It'd be very easy for her to come off as selfish for her insistence that Raven accept her destiny, but there's one extra factor to consider. They've been told that if Raven doesn't accept her destiny, it's likely their story will cease to exist, along with everyone in it. These two basically form the core of the conflict and act as poster children for their sides. Raven and her desire for freedom from a terrible future, and Apple and her desire for her predestined happily ever after, while not risking the erasure of everyone she knows and loves. When Apple was shown her destiny, it skims past her being poisoned and goes on to her living happily ever after. But Raven's involves persecution, homelessness, and being locked up forever, which her mother currently is. Though her mother is apparently uniquely more evil than she's supposed to be. It's understandable why they don't see eye to eye. Apple fears her happy future, or future in general, has been destroyed, and Raven does not want to be trapped in an unhappy one. They're tunnel visioned on what they think is right. It's a conflict that manages to drum up understanding for both sides, as you have to question if one of them is being selfish and what the right thing to do is. Dare I say, it's a morally grey conflict. Do you adhere to the safe destinies you've been provided, even if it involves the suffering of some, or do you risk the uncertainty of trying to forge your own? It's made even better by the fact that they can't both have what they want because of how integral they are to each other's stories. I mean, the fact it's a kids show means there's a definite slant towards Raven being right, but beyond that, we can see why Apple and the Royals think the way they do beyond the threat to their own happily ever afters. That's one thing this show does that many things can fail to do when trying to portray a morally grey conflict between two sides. But beyond these poster children for their side, the show has a really big cast. Hasbro had a lot of toys it wanted to sell after all, and I find the way various characters interact with this conflict to be fascinating. Because that's the thing about morally grey conflicts. Putting people on sides definitively is a bit reductive. Even if the nature of the dolls the show was created to sell means they require a direct classification, that is, royals and rebels, it's not as simple as putting the characters in boxes. One notable hiccup among the royals is Briar Beauty, Sleeping Beauty's daughter, whose name is another application of my bullet example, except this time it's more like calling them gone. She is destined to sleep for 100 years. Knowing that, she chooses to live her life to the fullest extent she can.
Everyone, I set up a bungee jumping platform on the east turret. Briar, hocus focus!
She's really fun. And while she starts out as a royal fully prepared to accept her destiny, there's one notable difference between her and Apple.
We all have our part to play. Easy for you to say, Apple. You get poisoned for what, like a week?
Yeah, while Apple sees her poisoning as a short step to happiness, Briar's happiness comes at a higher cost. All her relationships with everyone who isn't a direct member of her kingdom. Her happily ever after isn't so happy, and her party girl personality is just her trying to spend as much time with her friends as possible before she has to sleep through the rest of their lives. Wow, this show is darker than I remember. She's a royal with a happily ever after at the end of the story, but to her the price is simply way too high. Though the royals aren't really as squeaky clean as you'd imagine, which is where Fable Thorn, daughter of the Dark Fairy from Sleeping Beauty, comes in. She's a villain and she does not mind her destiny or having to be evil, making her such an interesting counterpart to Raven's existence. She's basically everything the royal side wants rebels to be, but because she embraces being evil, she can be a source of a lot of conflicts. But of course, there are also the characters who only exist because of a deviation from the story. Cerise and Ramona Badwolf, the children of Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. As you can imagine, the very existence of these two is an act of rebellion that they must hide, hiding one of their parents when they go to school and pretending not to be sisters as they barrel towards their destinies, which would lead to Ramona eating Cerise before Hunter, the son of the huntsman, cuts her open. I'm working on a video about how dark children's shows can be. You should subscribe so you don't miss it. But all of this talk about accepting or rejecting destiny raises a new question. What if you don't want to reject the concept of destiny? Which brings us to Duchess Swan, daughter of Odette, the Swan Princess. She's technically classified as a royal for her adherence to destiny, she just doesn't want her own. She'd much prefer to steal someone else's, a very rebel means to achieving a royal goal. She's an interesting reflection of Apple, someone who would prefer a pleasant spelled out destiny, just one who doesn't have it. And speaking of going about being royal in the most rebel way you can, there's the case of Holly and Poppy O'Hare, the twin daughters of Rapunzel. What, they didn't want to name them Tower and Knife to the Back or something? Anyway, they lived their whole lives believing Holly was the oldest and thus would be the one to follow their mother's footsteps, while Poppy got to forge her own destiny. Except it isn't true, because Poppy is actually older. They wind up resolving to keep that a secret, with Poppy still wanting to find her own destiny and Holly essentially doing what Duchess wants and hijacking someone else's destiny. And of course, a discussion of destiny in this show wouldn't really be complete without mentioning Darling Charming. The sister of the Princess Charming, she should be a damsel in distress, but she's more interested in doing all the heroic stuff boys get to do, even if she lets her secret actions get attributed to her brother Daring. But at this point, that's not that unique among the cast. What makes her unique is the surprise effect she has on Apple's story. As the poster girl for the Royals, Apple is the quintessential follow your story girl. What's interesting is the fact that the Prince Charming of her story isn't Daring like everyone thought it was. It's Darling, a plot point that would have been really interesting if the show dove deeper into it instead of just stop being made. In the Dragon Game special, Apple was poisoned by Raven's mom and fell into her extended sleep a bit earlier than expected. And it wound up being Darling's kiss, or as they played it off in the show, CPR, yeah, sure, that woke Apple from her slumber. And that has a lot of implications about how Apple's story plays out. Because for all intents and purposes, she does experience her fairy tale. But her version has a big enough twist that it's become a unique story with its own interesting implications for how things play out. That's the funny thing about Ever After, really. It's about characters trying to live out their own stories and having a conflict about whatever story they want to be part of, but technically that conflict is their story from the perspective of the audience. Apple White and Raven Queen's story isn't Snow White. It's Ever After High, a web series about challenging destiny and the conflict between who you are and who people say you are. And being based on many different fairy tales with characters having their own different circumstances and stances on the topic, it can explore its central theme really thoroughly. A rather deep premise for a cartoon made to sell dolls that didn't so much end as it did lose steam and stop being made. But what do you think? Did you watch Ever After High? Tell me your thoughts on it and this video in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thank you and good day.